In this video we'll be looking at converting percentages into fractions and fractions into percentages. So let's start off with converting percentages into fractions. Now, out of all of the conversions between fractions, decimals, percentages, this is probably one of the easiest, although I say that as a maths teacher. So to do this, simply divide the percentage by 100, and you want to write that as a fraction, so not using the division symbol, and then simplify if possible. Now the key thing to note that when you have got quite complicated percentages, i.e. decimal percentages, then what you'll need to do is once you've written this over 100, you'll need to multiply both the numbers, both the numerator and the denominator, by 10 if you've got one decimal place as the percentage, or 100 if you've got two decimal places in the percentage, or 1000 if it was 3, and so on. Now if that makes absolutely no sense to you at all, do not worry. I'm going to go through some examples and I'll explain what all of this all means. I'll definitely incorporate adding this to your notes or your revision cards if that is what you are doing. So let's have a look at some examples. So what we want to do is convert each of these percentages as a fraction. As you can see, there are a range of either big numbers, small numbers, and we've also got a cheeky decimal number there as well, percentage as well. So starting this off, let's get a decent colour pen. Let's go for purple. So all we want to do is divide the percentage over 100. So it's going to be 32 over 100. And then what you then want to do is then simplify if possible. Now, obviously, if both numbers are even, you can definitely divide by 2, but don't automatically think that when you're simplifying fractions, that you've always got to halve the numbers, because sometimes you might have to divide by 3, sometimes by 5, sometimes by 6 and 7, and the bigger number that you divide by always means you're going to do less work. So, for example, if I divide both these two numbers by 2, I'd get 16 over 50, and I can divide that again by 2, which is 8 over 25, and that there is my final answer. For number 2, let's use a different colour. So again, I'm going to do 43 over 100. And because I know that 43 is a prime number, that there is no other simplifying I can do, so that there is my final answer. And then let's move on to 3. So again, I'm just going to do 8, which is the percentage. I'm just going to simply divide that by 100. And again, as they're both even, I can divide both numbers by 2. Again, still both even, so I can divide by 2 again. So I get 2 over 25. And then for letter, for question 4, so here we've got 70 over 100. So again, I can simplify that to make 35 over 50. And then here, although the one's odd and one's even, I notice that both numbers can be divided by 5. So 35 divided by 5 is 7. And 50 divided by 5 is 10, and that there is my answer in its simplified fraction. Now moving on to question 5, as we talked about, we've got a decimal number. So again, the first thing you want to do is do 4.2 divided by 100. Now the problem with this is that you can't write a decimal in a fraction, so what do we then do? So in this case, what we need to do is, because we've got one number after the decimal point in 4.2, as you can see there, I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10. Now if I had two numbers after the decimal point, so let's say I had 4.32, then what I would do is I'd multiply both numbers by 100. If I had 1.737, because I've got three numbers after the decimal point, I'll multiply both the top and the bottom by 1000. So let me just get rid of that in case you return to this video and wondering where on earth that came from. So 4.2 times 10, all I'm going to do is move the decimal point one place, so that becomes 42. And 10 times 100 is 1000. And again, I've not finished because I can simplify this fraction, so I've got 21 over 500, and that doesn't simplify, so that there is your final answer. So you can see here, relatively quite straightforward. If a fraction can simplify, it may be worth 2 marks, because you'll get 1 mark for just writing over 100 and 1 mark for simplifying it. And if you left it as an unsimplified answer, then you could lose some marks. So let's move on to converting fractions into percentages. Now there are several ways in which you may choose to do this, and I'm going to try and go through some of the popular ones. However, you just need to find which one's easier for you, but also look at the question in hand. In some cases, one method might be easier than the others, and in other one method might go for the other. So it's important that you learn all the methods and that you're able to assess the question and then decide which is the best method to get me the correct answer. So in terms of method 1, so there are several so what we want to do for method 1 is, and this is probably the most easiest and the first thing you want to look out for, is if your denominator is any of those red numbers, as you can see on the screen, then all you then need to do is multiply both the numerator and the denominator by whatever stated. So for example, if your denominator is 2, then multiply both the top and the bottom number by 50. If the denominator is 4, multiply both numbers by 25. If it's 5, multiply both numbers by 20. If it's 10, multiply both numbers by 10. 20, multiply both numbers by 5. 25, multiply both numbers by 4. And 50, multiply both numbers by 2. And again, certainly worth recommending that you make a note of this method. And that's probably, and you'll tend to find that this method and those denominators tend to come up on a non-calculator paper, and I'll explain to you how we use those. So let's have a look at some examples of those. So in the first one, well, we've got to convert each one into a percentage. Now your end game is to try and get the denominator over 100. Now as you can see in question 1, we've already got it over 100, so then that just simply becomes 84%. So once it's over 100, your answer is basically whatever your numerator is. So looking at question 2, I've got 1 over 2. Now if you go back, if your denominator is 2, you multiply both the top number and the bottom number by 50. So 1 times 50 is 50, and 2 times 50 is 100. So again, we've got 100 as our denominator, so then the final answer here is going to be 50%. And moving on to question 3, so again, we've got 3 over 5. So again, when you've got 5 as a denominator, we want to multiply both the top and the bottom by 20. And 3 times 20 is 60, and 5 times 20 is 100, giving us an answer of 60%. And again, as we've got it over 100, our answer is 60. Moving on to question 4. So again, I've got 7 over 10 rather. So again, when my denominator is 10, I multiply both the top and the bottom by 10, in which I get 7 times 10, which is 70, 10 times 10, which is 100, and again, I've got 100 at the denominator, so the answer is going to be the numerator, so in this case, it's going to be 70%. And then moving on to question 5, we've got 12 over 25, so again, when you've got 25, you multiply both the top and the bottom by 4, so 4 times 12 is 48, and I've got 100, and again, once I've got that magic number of 100, the answer is simply going to be the numerator. And moving on to question 6, we've got 13 over 20, so here I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 5, in which I get 60, no I don't, I get 65 over 100, so then the answer is going to be 65%. And then finally for question 7, we've got 28 over 50, and again I'm going to multiply both numbers by 2, giving me 56 over 100, and yep, you've guessed it, the correct answer we should have is going to be 56%. So moving on to another method, so method 2. Now this is going, now we're starting moving into calculator territory, or questions that may be worth a few extra marks for. So for method 2 is to multiply the numerator by 100 and then divide by the numerator by the denominator. So in other words, what I should write new, let's just add that in, because it should be the new numerator by the denominator, and let's just get rid of all that, and let's try that again. So an example of this is, as you can see, our denominator is not one of those highlighted numbers. So when you've got that, so when you haven't got those magic 7 numbers, what we then need to do is we multiply the numerator by 100. So that becomes 700 divided by 8. Now what I then want to do is work that out. So I'm going to do 8 goes outside the bus stop, and I'm going to have 700. So 8 goes in 7 no times, and then I'm going to work out how many 8's go into 70, and that's going to be 8, remainder 6. Then how many 8's go into 60, that's going to be 7, remainder 4. And then this is where I start incorporating a decimal point. And then how many 8's go into 40, that's going to be 5 with no remainder. And then your percentage is basically going to be whatever number is on top of your bus stop. So the answer to this particular question is going to be 87.5%. And again, you can always check your answer by typing this into your calculator, and if you've done it correctly, you should get straight away 87.5. And let's have a look at the last and final method. So method 3. So this is where you divide the numerator by the denominator, converting it into a decimal, and then multiplying by 100. So it's kind of doing it in the opposite way to what we talked about. So again, let's worth just highlighting this, and what I'm going to do is go through this as an example. So we're going to do the dividing times it by 100 at the end. So here I've got 5 over 6. So I'm going to convert that. So 6, whatever your denominator is, that goes outside the denominator, outside the bus stop rather. So here I've got, how many 6's go into 5? None. So I put my decimal point, add a 0, and I carry the 5. How many 6's go into 50? Well, that's going to be 8, remainder 2. How many 6's go into 20? That's going to be 3, remainder 2. And 3, and you can see that I'm going to constantly keep getting a remainder of 2. And then once I've got 0.833, I'm going to multiply this number by 100. Now to multiply a number by 100, all I need to do is move the decimal point 2 places. So what that then becomes is 83.33%, and rounding this number up, I get 83.3%, and that there is my answer. Now again, if you do have a decimal answer, then I strongly recommend that you don't round your number up to the nearest whole number, that you either round your number up to either 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places, but usually speaking, I would say that the question will be written for you. But if it doesn't, and again, it's very good practice that if you have rounded your number up, to always state to how many decimal places you have rounded the number up to.